Shalom, hello everybody. My name is Barak Oded from Israel. I am a musician, choir conductor, a son for a Yemenite parents. In this program, I will try to show you all the secrets of the Yemenite music, the holy songs. And also, in the end, I will compare it to the women's songs. But first, I want to summarize some important details from the last program of the Yemenite praying style. Eastern music has no harmony, only unison, but the style is heterophonic, repetitive. The cantor sings and the congregation follows along, responsive singing. There are no songs, only recitative modus. Praying with modes and much improvisation. Yemenite children aged 3 or 4 start to learn Torah with a strong focus on modus. They are trained to be musical. The majority of Yemenite Jews are Baladi, which is referenced here. There is another section called Shami, who have been somewhat influenced by the Spanish Jewish prayer since 17th century. Yemen's holy songs are included in a special book in Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic called Diwan. The Diwan contains sacred poems. Most of the songs describe the love between Israel nation in the diaspora to God, and also a lot of them are praying and begging for helping and salvation from the great bitter exile. But also you can find there a lot of songs fitting to Shabbat, holidays, celebrations, circumcisions and weddings, etc., etc. Most have been composed and written by Jewish Yemenite over the past 400 years. Ayelet Hen is the first song from within a medley sung by Mizmoret Teman, the representative choir of the city Rosh Ain in Israel. So, this song describes the agony of the exile of the Yemenite Jews and thank God for his help and comfort. With a typical drum accompaniment, there is a preservation of the original. Generally, in the Yemenite and Eastern style, there are no harmony, but rather they singing in quartet, quintet and octaves intervals. A typical classical drumming and responsive singing. When the Yemenites immigrated to Israel with the Operation Magic Carpet, everyone brought their own books with them, the Diwan. They were told by the Jewish agency that the Torah scrolls, jewelry and books were too heavy to bring on the plane and were told to send them by ship. Much of the property was stolen and today can be found in archives in US and around the world. They were presented as gifts to Jewish agency workers and supporters. The Jews in Yemen lived in thousands of small villages across the country. Media and communication was little relatively unknown through the millennia. Therefore, every Jewish village has its own handwritten diwan, and each family in the cities had at least one. Each is unique and personal, containing different poems, songs, and variations. The Yemenites did not use instruments for accompaniment since the 2nd century CE. There is a Mishnah forbidding musical instrument in memory of the destructions of the Second Temple. That is why all their prayers as well as the sacred songs are all a cappella. Makeshift drums from a spoon on a metal tray or the like would often keep the beat. Audience responses were usually correlated with the cantor singing, but rather they singing in quartet, quintet and octaves intervals. The lead singer was also usually the writer. He sang one sentence and the audience repeated it. But in this song we hear in the background Oded Eli, sung by the Yemenite choir Mizmorei Teman. All these rules do not exist, of course, because I wrote arrangements for my choir with a Western flavor and harmonic adaptation. The Yemenites were rich in spirituality and had a strong belief in God. The song Imnin Alu relay that a rich people lock the doors on you and do not give charity that may be paralleled to the door of the Creator, because his door never locked to prayers and supplications. Some Yemenite songs have a slow opening without rhythm or beat. These are called the Nashid. The Nashid is similar to an overture in Western music or Mawal in the Eastern Arab music. Most of the songs and prayers are sung in a holy modes. It's parallelic to the natural minor scale in the Western music, but the song in the background is made in a yoni mode, which means something that's parallelic to the major scale in the Western music. Most of the songs that appear in the D1, including this song, speak mainly about the love of God, the longing for the land of Israel, and the pain of exile. This song, Suru Manothi, speaks of the God of Israel who is as strong as a rock, and one can count on him to protect you from evil in any time or place.
Shaddai Amor Nodai Lagoluthenu
For the Jews in general, even those who incorporate instruments, it is forbidden to play on the Sabbath. The strict laws honoring the Sabbath state that one may not even clap or tap on an instrument, so on the Sabbath there is no way to keep the rhythm. Therefore, all Yemenite Sabbath songs have no rhythm at all. The vocalist is completely free to extend or shorten as desired, as can be seen in this song. This next song is a prayer to God asking Him to save us from the painful, bitter exile among the Arab nations. This sacred song was sung by men only, but here we have a Yemenite female singer, Dalia, from the Yemenite choir Mizmorei Teman, singing a cappella with a particularly clear voice.
Shem Tov Lecha Yesevet Esir Habsacho Habsacho.
The Hebrew language. When the Jews returned to their homeland in 1948 after thousands of years of exile, every sect was speaking a different Hebrew with a different accent and integrated words of the lands they came from. They could barely communicate with each other. It was more reminiscent of the Tower of Babel than an ingathering and return home. Ashkenazi Jews could not understand and communicate with Moroccan Jews, who in turn could not understand Persian, Hungarian, or Iraq Jews, etc. Ani ash'al, ani ash'al. There is 22 letters in the Hebrew language and 28 consonants. How it's possible, right? So, there is 6 magic letters with a special character. If you put a dot, emphasis, in the center, you get a different consonant. ba, va, ra, ja, da, da, cha, ka, fa, pa, tha, ta. Well, don't be surprised that only the Yemenites kept these rules till today.
Ashar Goro.
For this example, these three letters, if you ask Israelian in the street, he will tell you the same consonant, ta, ta, and ta. But the truth is that the Yemenite will tell you ta, tha, and ta. So you can see that the pronunciations is changed from letter to letter depend on this small dot. Of course, all this wisdom is coming from the Torah. They were strict to read it and dealing with it every day, all the time.
Saparithamo Saparithamo Tamimo Saparithamo
Despite thousands of years of exile, Yemenites remain the guardians of the Hebrew language. Here is one example from among thousands of similar poems showing the richness of the secret poetry. Yemenite poetry has been compared to the writing of Kings David and Solomon. For example, Mishlei book is very rich in riddles and allegories. In the background we hear my special choir Mizmorei Teman from Rosh Hain from the second disc we published. The song is called Sapari Thamo. Tell me, you innocents, daughter of kings, let's rejoicing together. Please tell me, where are you living in my body? And then the dove, the Holy Spirit, answer, I'm here in the uppest holy place in a temple. Then he suggests, let's become together, sleep together, and she said, okay, without flesh touch. It shows us the richness of the poem text existing in the holy books called Diwan. How have the Yemenites managed to keep the language so precisely over thousands of years of exile when other communities failed? Two reasons for their success, to my opinion. First, they were extremely strict about the Torah commandments, including reading the Bible and Mishnah and Gemara every day. The Torah was both a spiritual as well as a linguistic text. They become very strict about the Torah commands and, of course, how to read the Torah. Therefore, they become very strict about every letter. Every point, every dot become very important, and especially they learn how to teach the new generation to keep the tradition. The second reason, there were a generation of Jews in Yemen before the violence started and before Islam was introduced. There were 1400 years of stability and quiet in Yemen.
حافسي وغم حشقي باثنو ذيب عوري أبادي.
Who composed the sacred poetry of Yemen? Unknown. The music was passed down from father to son, from generation to generation. There are no notes or documentation. Only the words, which were carefully collected over the years, are available in hand-bound, handwritten diwan.
Ben Yamin, usmal ma basamath Ben Yamin.
The various poets were also probably the composers, like Mori Shalom Shabazi, Rabbi Saadia Amram, Ibn Ezra, and more. They taught the tune to many others by repeating it. Many times they borrowed and perhaps stole tunes as they had heard something similar. In those times, there was no registration, no copyright. Everything was open and available. Now we shall hear how the Yemenites make the Birkat Kohanim, the bless of the priest in Israel. Birkat Kohanim is a very good example to see how the Yemenite music system is working, and it's a very good example to summarize our conclusion. It's a very good example to summarize our conclusion. 1. A cappella. 2. Cantor and a group. In this case, it's not a simple group, it's the priest, the Kohanim, which they have to repeat each word after the cantor to prevent any mistake. 3. They use a mode only, not a scale, not a singing, but a mode. Also, this mode, not influence from the Arab environment, it's not a makam, the Arab scale, but it's a very pure mode used by the Kohanim all the time. 5. It's not homophonia, it's not polyphonia, it's heterophonia. What is heterophonia? The Yemenis sing with freedom of improvisation that includes frill and trills, and each one chooses the tone appropriate to his voice, which may be a bit limited in quintet and octet, quarts, etc., etc. So this is heterophonia. The next song, Kirya Yefeifia, talking about Jerusalem, how it's beautiful, is a very good connection to the next part, the women music. It's a typical song, a cappella, simple song with a very simple sentence to repeat, no instrument, only a little bit rhythm with the fingers. Very typical.
عيرنا مهنات لمالك وسوريخ عيرنا.
In the background we hear Aharon Amram. It's a very good example because he was one of the first people who record themselves in Israel after the Aliyah in 1948. The song talks about Jerusalem, the beautiful city, and the desire to go to Zion. So this song will take us in a great segue into our next section on women's poetry. Unlike sacred poetry, women's poetry was influenced and is almost indecipherable from Muslim Arabic poetry. For example, women's songs have typical Arab instruments like oud, kanun, Arabic flute, Arabic violin, etc.
قلبي أصبر وهقولني صبر قلبي.
The Western songs working on scale, major, minor, etc. The Arabic scale working on makam. Makam is like a scale, and there is a name of makamat, like, for example, makam Hijaz, makam Buyuth, Makam Sabar, etc. Makams has also three-quarter tones between the intervals that do not exist in sacred poetry or Western music at all. The Yemenite rhythm that accompanied sacred songs were made by drumming on a metal tray or tool made on tin, mostly 4/4, 3/4, 3/8, and some women's songs made by 7/8 rhythm called dasa, a favorite dance rhythm. Like our next song called Habib Zachario, translate to Zachario, my love. The woman turns to her lover and complains, accusing him of looking at other girls. It's a very typical women's songs, and sometimes the words even worse. In the beginning, in the early 50s, after established Israel, only men recorded both the sacred and the women's songs. The materials did not exist in anywhere, but only inside the women's head. So they had to go around with a tape recorder and look for the older women and hear from them the songs that know by heart, because the women in Yemen could not read and write, and the material, the songs, was not exist or documented at all. But there were also singers who from their inspiration also composed original songs. The greatest of them all is Aharon Amram, who composed lyrics and melodies for many songs, published a lot of records. Most of them were quite similar in character to the Yemenite tradition musically and textually. After him, Kam Zion Golan also published a lot of songs in Yemen, Arab and Hebrew, but both of them were not heard in the media. It should be noted that radio in Israel never broadcast the Yemenite songs, so the cassette underground developed in Israel a free market that only the Eastern guys were happy to buy. When the majority of the Yemenites immigrated to Israel in 1948 without musical instruments, the legacy of women's poetry continued to be underground and was not even expressed. The first Yemenized record, including Aharon Amram, Dahyani, Mauga'a, and others, initially only recorded primarily sacred songs a cappella without instruments, and only later dared to make musical instruments and recorded women's songs. It's also assumed that since they could not play musical instrument at all, they didn't dare to record a cappella. In contrast, the Yemenis who came from Aden, the port city of Yemen, which controlled by the English, they know how to play, so some of them recorded songs, women's songs with instruments in the background, not a cappella anymore. But still it's controlled by the Eastern law, which means it's unisono, the ode play with the singer together the same tune. Also they use makam with a 3/4 interval tone between. In the past, the women themselves sang only in closed ceremonies to women, only like the well-known Hina, for example, ritual for the bride before the wedding. Only in the 70s start a wave of recordings of women's songs in Hebrew, Arabic, and also the performance of the religion women themselves. The shame disappeared. The songs are all sung only in spoken Arabic, unlike the sacred songs which are sung mainly in Hebrew, but also in Arabic and Aramaic. The women, unlike the men, never went to study Hebrew or Torah with their teachers. So, how the women learned the songs? Well, the Jewish women have the chance to go out once a week to make laundry in the river. There they can meet other girls from Arab neighborhood and they can teach each other Arab women's songs. The majority of the songs were talking about women's trouble, women's affair, gossip, and men and family crying about their troubles, etc. So, the songs also with a lot of text and a very simple melody which repeat all the time. Also, each musical phrase was multiplied by the audience, responsible style, responsorial singing, as in the sacred poetry. Why? Because in those times it was the only way how you can teach each other. Some of the songs were like the slave singing, which accompanies the boring works with appropriate rhythm for making butter or scratch the laundry in the river. I guess that the Jewish women learned how to filterize some songs according to their believing, not to pass them to the next generation and not to learn them at all. And for sure, they tried. The women's songs were not written in any book and passed through the generation by heart. By the way, some of the men who loved to sing also sometimes sang in Arabic like the women, but this was never documented. Only after immigration in 1948, they start recording the women's songs. From the start of our existing as a nation, many Yemenite singers become famous and greatly influence the Israeli music in the country. Among them, I will mention Shoshana Damari, who began her Yemenite Hebrew poetry recording in 1943. It's important to remind everyone, but we have no time for that, and Dr. Google is there 24/7. Ahuva Ozeri, צלילי הכרם, צלילי העוד, דקמוש,
הנה אני חוזר לבית מקדשך, לראות גאונך והוד אדרתך. הנה אני
זוהר ארגוב,
את עולמי עם שחרת לי כל היום, את עולמי בלילה, את החלום, את בדמי ברוחי ולבבי, את הניחוח המתוק הפרח בגני.
שימי תבורי,
זה כינור דוד ביד דוד המלך, הפורט המיתריו. כתוב לי בו ביין לעת ערב, מלווהו את שיריו.
בועז שרעבי, אבנר גדסי,
כל זאת היה אתמול, ונדמה שחלפה לשנה, ברגעי חלום גדול, נשארה רק מנגינה.
and many others. A lot of talent Yemen become famous, like Yizhar Cohen and Gali Atari, who even represented Israel in the Eurovision competition.
לעולם, הללויה, ישירו כולם, במילה אחת בודדה, הלב מלא בהמון תודה, והולם גם הוא איזה עולם נפלא.
But in the late 70s, a girl Yemenite singer, very young, by the name of Ofra Haza, stood out in a small theater workshop in Tel Aviv and made some songs recording of both Yemenite and Israeli songs with an original style, a modern songs combining with the Yemenite antique melodies style. For her, Ofra Haza, it was a very big step ahead for her, which led her later to a big successful in the Eurovision of 1983 with the song Hi, I'm Alive, about Israel of course. Later, of course, everybody know that she was famous all the world with the song Im Nin'alu that we heard before, which made her very popular also among youth population, and it was played also in clubs and discotheques. Well, the Yemenite did a great job in Israel and in the world influenced the music. So, I thank you all for listening and being with me. I hope you understand me. This is Barak Oded from Israel.